Thank you. Madam Attorney General, I want to go to the international scene and international organized crime. From meetings and hearings in both this committee and the Intelligence Committee, we see that there is, number one, a growth of international organized crime. And one of my questions would be, is that valid? And second, the scope of international organized crime growing. So from either being contract killers for nation states that don't want to get their hands dirty, to human trafficking, to fraud. So most recently, and I don't know if some of my colleagues, some in this room over the age of 65, got three of the kinds of phone calls I did, which told me that I was being sued by IRS for failure of payment. IRS wanted me. All I needed to do was give them my credit card and PIN number, and all things would be well. Of course, we've taken proper action on that. But that's pretty scary, yes. Which means that they are targeting people of a certain age. And it's one thing to get unsolicited phone calls to buy home alert systems. It's another to get this. So my question to you is, number one, is organized crime growing? International, and number two, do you have the resources, because they're at it in so many other different levels, from terrorism to trafficking to international fraud, some very big trying to hack our Medicare system and Social Security, at Social Security Administration, to an individual unsuspecting taxpayer scared to death by a pretty rough and rude phone call.
Thank you, Senator Mikulski. You've raised some important issues, in particular the fact that transnational organized crime is now cutting across a number of spheres of criminal activity. Just to address initially the last issue that you raised about the IRS scam phone call that you received. This is, in fact, the type of scam that we are seeing on the rise. Many of the calls originate from within the country. Some of them originate from outside the country. They do target our vulnerable populations, in particular our older Americans, and that's why not to focus specifically on transnational organized crime, but in terms of dealing with crime targeting our elderly citizens, one of the things that we are looking at is increased funding there that would give us 10 task forces around the country to focus specifically on elder-related crime. But to your first point about transnational organized crime, the FY 2017 request does include $1.5 million to fund OCDEF's Priority Transnational Organized Crime Initiative, and in fact, that's one of the areas in which we see this growing. The FBI is embarking on a 2016 pilot effort to watch list a certain number of transnational organized crime individuals, and the goal is to provide a watch listing capability that the government can operate similar to our terrorist screening center, so that just because someone doesn't fall in the terrorist bucket, we can still set up a watch list program for them that indicates that they are involved in transnational organized crime. This cuts across so many areas. Our cybercrime request, for example, deals with the issue of fraud and also computer intrusions. Many of the computer hacking that we've experienced, be it on a government level, or as directed against individuals or directed against segments of industry, originate from overseas. And so the cybercrime efforts that we are asking for, essentially for FY 2017, a total of $950 million, would give us the resources that we need within Maine Justice, with attorneys, with the FBI, with increased agents to deal with that issue. As it relates to human trafficking, that request is for $89 million, and that would also cover domestic and international efforts to deal with human trafficking. It would support the work we do with task forces with our state and local colleagues, as well as the investigations that we do overseas. So this area is woven throughout the department's budget, and I thank you for bringing attention to it.
Well, it shows just really how big this is, and I encourage my colleagues to look at it. One last question. As you know, we're working very hard to establish the trust between local law enforcement and the citizens they're sworn to protect. Do you think that body cameras are an important tool to establishing this, not only evidentiary reasons, but trust reasons? or do you see impediments and potholes that to this? Could you give us what you think about the efficacy of body cameras from both sides, law enforcement and the citizens that you actively engaged in yourself?
Thank you, Senator. I think that this is one of the most important issues we have facing the country, that is to say the trust connection between citizens and law enforcement. I think is reflective of the bond between citizens and government writ large. And so as we deal with this issue, we are strengthening and reinforcing that overall bond as well. Body cameras are an important tool in this regard as it relates to local law enforcement. We currently support a number of pilot programs that have enabled several jurisdictions to purchase body cameras and to also deal with the issues of data storage and data retention and privacy issues that also arise therefrom as well. I certainly think in my travels across the country, as I've talked with law enforcement leaders and community leaders, I meet with them separately, I meet with them together. I talk to people who are actively working on this issue. And the reason why I think it's still an important tool is that the conversations are helpful, but particularly in situations where the bond of trust is so frayed, having that third party sort of open eye can be very helpful. And in fact, in jurisdictions that have adopted the use of body cameras so far over the last several years, those jurisdictions almost uniformly have seen a reduction in the number of citizen complaints against police officers. So citizens feel that essentially they have accountability. Officers who initially may be resistant to this, and it varies throughout the law enforcement community depending upon the size of the department and the issues that it raises, but law enforcement may start out being resistant to this idea, but generally are finding it very, very helpful because it also gives them the independent third eye as to what happened. And they have corroboration for their statements, and they have that useful evidence. Of course, it doesn't capture an entire interaction. It doesn't answer all of the questions, but it does give both sides in the debate something on which to rely. And from that, you can also work toward rebuilding the relationship of trust that is so important. So the jurisdictions that I've been speaking with are looking forward to receiving body cameras. Those that have them are finding them extremely useful, and I'm getting very positive comments from community members as well.
Thank you. That was very insightful, Mr. Chairman.
So